Dre'Mont Jones is coming to Baltimore after being acquired by the Baltimore Ravens, and he sent a message both to the Ravens and his former team in the Titans. We talk about that, so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today on this Tuesday. It's deadline day, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We have a jam-packed episode here today for you. As the Ravens made a trade last night. They traded for Dre'Mont Jones of the Tennessee Titans. We did a huge instant reaction show, and we talked about it on the Locked On Ravens squad show with current Ravens long snapper Nick Moore, as well as former Ravens receiver Qadry Ismail, Sam Njoku, obviously on that with us as well. So we had a lot of Dre'Mont Jones coverage, but today we're going to be diving a little bit more into Dre'Mont Jones, what he brings to the team. And it's funny because Brian McFarland, who is the Ravens salary cap expert, he and I recorded an episode before the Dre'Mont news broke. And so we're still going to have that episode. I'm just going to talk with you in the first part of the show about Dre'Mont Jones. And then in the second and third parts of the show, we'll play the Brian conversation because it was really insightful in terms of both the Jaire Alexander trade, because John Harbaugh broke his silence on that. And there were new trade details revealed in that whole situation, as well as the Ravens and their trade deadline situations, what they could do, what they should do in the whole 9 yards there. So talk about Dre'Mont Jones and his messaging in the first part of the show and just a little bit about Dre'Mont in general. Then we'll dive into our conversation with Brian, Jaire Alexander, as well as the Ravens deadline. And of course, we will have a live stream for you here at around 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Deadline is at 4. We'll do an instant reaction stream and kind of go over the Ravens deadline as a whole, as well as any other trades that happen. If they happen before 4, we'll have streams for those as well. So let's dive into this here. Dre'Mont Jones. First, though, I do want to remind everyone and tell everyone today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, Dre'Mont Jones time. This trade for the Ravens, I think it's a fine move. You know, it's not the winning the Super Bowl type of move, but it's also not like this needle-moving move that, the Ravens have Dre'Mont Jones, they're going to win a Super Bowl now, right? I think you can have both schools of thought, but I want to make it clear that I want to have the Ravens deadline evaluated as a whole. So if Dre'Mont Jones is a move and they acquire Quentin Williams or someone else on the D-line, maybe an O-lineman, I like the move a lot. If it's just Dre'Mont Jones, then that's a different conversation. So Dre'Mont Jones, he seems excited to be in Baltimore. You know, he ended up kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit about NFL life. And his message was, quote, "The NFL is too crazy, LOL. Thank you, Titans family. I loved and appreciated my short time in Nashville too much. Cam is the truth, too. Y'all give him time. He can be great." Then he said, "I'm ready to be a Raven, rocking that purple and black. Hashtag Ravens flock." So, cool to see him already embrace his new opportunity. Also cool to see him give love to Cam Ward. That was really awesome. And I think not only did the Tennessee fan base appreciate that, I appreciate that because it shows he rocked with his quarterback. And I think a lot of people took notice of that as well. So I'm excited for Dre'Mont Jones. He's a guy that has inside-outside versatility. He started off his career as a defensive lineman playing on the interior, but has since shifted out to the edge. He has 4.5 sacks this season for Tennessee. It's his 7th NFL season, but those 4.5 sacks for Dre'Mont Jones have come in the past 4 games. So he had a sack against the Raiders, a sack against the Patriots, a sack against the Colts, and a sack against the Chargers in the last 4 weeks. Those are the last 4 weeks he's played with the Titans. So certainly put on a pretty good audition. And I feel like that Dre'Mont Jones was a hot commodity, someone who has that inside-outside versatility. We know the Ravens love that. He's played the majority of his snaps this season on the edge, but he can hold it down on the edge and run situations. He'll probably make a couple mistakes there, but I think you can live with that. He has power to him. He can win one-on-one. The Ravens have struggled immensely in one-on-one situations this season, particularly when they rush 4. They have had a very hard time rushing 4 this year. one of the lowest marks ever when they rush 4. So that's why the Ravens have been blitzing a lot. Him and Carl Lawson, who John Harbaugh said on Monday that he looks ready to go. Those two guys both can win one-on-one. You can line them up outside and you can just let them go to work. So I'm excited for that. Dre'Mont Jones is not a guy that I would drop back into coverage, but Baltimore giving up a 5th-round pick that could turn into a 4th-round pick. It's not like they gave up their 3rd here. You can still use that for a guy like a Quinnen Williams, or maybe that's a 2nd round you can use him for Quinnen Williams. I don't know, but this seems like a good starter move. Again, it can't be the only move, but it can be a starter move. Now, this probably does take the Ravens out of the sweepstakes for other edge players. So Kayvon Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson, Bradley Chubb. I mean, if they do acquire another guy of the same caliber as Dre'Mont Jones, meaning with the versatility, they could maybe go get a guy like Chubb, who you can put technically both on the interior and exterior, but not as like a big D lineman type of guy. Like Dre'Mont Jones is big. He's 6'3", 281. So he truly, you can line him up outside, you can line him up inside. And I know that's part of the reason why Baltimore traded for him, but I'm intrigued. And he goes from a situation in Tennessee that's not competitive to a situation in Baltimore that, they're looking to get back to that. They have a soft schedule. Spent the first 4 years of his career in Denver. He has 35 career sacks over the course of his first 6+ years. He's never had a season below 3.5 sacks, and that 3.5 sack season came during his rookie season. So his career high is 6.5 sacks. He had that both in 2020 and 2022. But again, as he's transitioned over to the outside, he's dropped some weight, and he actually signed a pretty big deal with the Seahawks when Denver ended up letting him go, if I'm not mistaken. He was one of the prizes of that free agent class. And if I remember correctly, he signed, 3 years, $51.5 million deal. But then Seattle ended up moving on. And that's how he found himself in Tennessee on a cheaper deal. It was a 1 year, $8.5 million contract, but this is an expiring deal for Baltimore. So there's not any money on the books for next season. He has a $995,000 base salary, which, is what Baltimore will be on the hook for there. So again, it's a low risk, high reward move that has potential. I think Dre'Mont Jones will be a solid fit in Baltimore. As I mentioned, I don't think he's going to suddenly turn into this 10-sack player. I also don't think he's going to have no impact whatsoever. There were also other players I'm sure that other people wanted and that were potential fits on the edge. Arden Key was another guy in Tennessee that I thought would have been a pretty awesome fit there. I mentioned some of the other bigger names as well. Jalen Phillips, he got traded to the Eagles for a 3rd-round pick. So, that move was off the table for Baltimore. I would have been okay with that. I mean, Jalen Phillips, especially because Miami's eating money, that would have been a deal that I would have been all right with. But the production level's been low for Jalen Phillips this year. You'd have to bank on that potential, which I think would be fine. But, the Ravens clearly felt like I think a lot of this did come down to the versatility because you've lost a ton of your D linemen, right? A ton of your guys. And, you essentially have 2 roster spots in one with Dre'Mont Jones. Like for Patrick McCary, we've talked about on the O-line, right? Where he was 5 roster spots in one, and the Ravens have missed that versatility this season. Dre'Mont Jones can help you in multiple different spots, free up snaps from Mike Green in pure pass rush situations and take a little off of his plate and kind of allow him to kind of do his thing, which I think is really cool. So all of those are positives for Dre'Mont Jones. But again, I want to see the move stacked up against everything else the Ravens do or maybe don't do during this trade deadline. Again, I don't know at the time of this recording what happens. I'm recording this on Monday before Tuesday's deadline, so I'm not sure. But hopefully the Ravens will complement Dre'Mont Jones in that deal with a move or 2 more. I'd say 1 to 2 moves is probably realistic. I'm not expecting anything more than 2 other moves. 1 is probably the prediction I will have, but we'll see. A lot of exciting things. I think Dre'Mont Jones brings you a level of physicality and experience that can help this defense out because right now you just needed someone who was better than David Ojabo. You needed a body in there. And look, he's better than what they have from the majority of these guys on the roster right now. And he now becomes the Ravens leading sack guy with 4.5. So new sack leader alert in Baltimore. We'll see if they end up getting a guy who surpasses him at the deadline. Who knows? Coming up in the second part of the show, we will talk with Brian McFarland, Ravens salary cap, dive into our conversation with him, and it's a good one. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT isn't just about rent, it's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that with BILT, your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay. Whether I'm grabbing food at my favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, I'm still earning rewards. And BILT has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. Again, we'll have a live stream at 4:30 p.m. as the deadline finishes up, and we know the Ravens moves, or maybe they don't make any moves. I'm not sure, but we'll have that live stream for you. Plus, if there are any moves that happen before then, we'll have instant reaction streams for that as well. We're 5 days a week plus more here on Locked On Ravens, so tell a friend, tell a family member. We have them covered just like we have you covered here on Locked On Ravens. And also, you can follow me on social media at CashRecord34 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. Let's talk with Brian McFarland about Jaire Alexander. John Harbaugh broke his silence about that trade. We'll talk with Brian about what the Jaire Alexander move frees up, as well as other deadline plans, maybe, and as well as other trade details revealed for the Ravens. So let's dive into our conversation with Brian. Brian, it's great to have you back. Now, the last time we talked was right at the end of June, and obviously vibes, we were talking about, oh, this team, look at this roster, look at how good they're going to be. Obviously, it hasn't panned out that way so far, but they're showing a little bit of something. How are you feeling about the year so far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the last week has made it better. The Colts beating the Steelers yesterday would have made it even better. But that's, you dig a hole and you've got to rely on other teams. And, unfortunately, they still probably, with pretty much all of their division games ahead of them, which they're going to have to certainly sweep Cincinnati, sweep the Steelers, and probably still going to need a little more help, but that will go a long way towards hopefully getting them back into the division race. But they are going to need some help here and there, and hopefully, other than what happened yesterday will happen more often, and some team we're not expecting the Steelers to lose to will come up and bite them.
Yeah, and it seems like teams are good for 1 or 2 losses like that a year, and that includes the Ravens too.
Well,
so the Ravens can't afford
to
have those losses, but hey, if it happens to other teams that help the Ravens, I'm all for that. But the Ravens do have opportunities, Brian, to add a couple players to their roster to help them make whatever semblance of a stretch run is left for them. And there's certainly an opportunity with the way their schedule is and some of the stuff that you mentioned, and we'll talk about that they've shown over the last week or so. But the Ravens have been in the business so far, Brian, of trading players away. They've moved off of Odafe Owe as well as Jaire Alexander. And while that has netted them Alohi Gilman and some draft capital, hopefully people want to see a couple more guys being brought into the roster over the next couple hours here. We're recording this on Monday night for Tuesday. So, we got the news of Jalen Phillips getting traded to the Eagles. There are still plenty of options for Baltimore, but trading Jaire to the Eagles didn't necessarily come as a big shock to me, considering he wasn't getting playing time. He was a healthy scratch. John Harbaugh, he broke his silence on the situation, and he was asked about it on Monday. He said, I think it's kind of a trade deadline kind of situation. You've got a scenario where the trade deadline is coming up and there's opportunities to do different things and try to make your team better, and it falls in that category. And Brian, you outlined a couple of things that John Harbaugh is probably talking about there with opportunities and the things that trading away Jaire frees up for them. So what were your thoughts on the move? And then in your eyes, what does it open up for the Ravens, maybe in terms of cap space, roster space, or the whole 9 yards?
Yeah, I mean, I found it a little surprising. They always talk about wanting to have as much depth as possible, especially a corner. He was a great depth piece to have, assuming he was healthy and playing well, but obviously he wasn't playing well enough in practice to move ahead of any of the 3 or 4 guys ahead of him, even if and he doesn't play special teams, so that gave TJ Tampa, a bump up to the active day roster. So, so I think that's part of it. It did free up, and it actually only I know I posted on X that it was 2 million. That was a mistake. It did only free up 1 million. I had in my mind that his whole cap number was base salary, but there's a $2 million bonus and 2 million in salary. So they only saved one, so that's not that great, but it does give them 15 million right now, which is a lot more than they've had at the trade deadline. And trade deadline didn't really exist until about 6 years ago, really. But but it's more than they've had in a long time at this point. So, and certainly a lot of that came from trading Owe, because that was a big chunk of what they have now. So, but it does position them to be in a good spot to be able to pick up, salary and not have to haggle with another team necessarily about salary in some cases, and ask the other team to pick some salary up, and then maybe they get an offer from some team that's not looking for them to pick salary up. So it gives them that flexibility. So we'll see what happens, but they certainly have some areas of need along the defensive line, especially offensive line, perhaps. So, and they've got a lot of draft picks. So they have 10 which counts 2 comp picks, which seem pretty solid, and then they potentially could get 2 more, just sevenths, so it's not a lot. Now none of those can be traded at this point, so you're really looking at 8 draft picks that are viable at this point. But that they can trade draft picks knowing that they are probably getting 2/5 for Stevens and Macari, and maybe 2 sevenths as well to add on. So it does give them a little flexibility to say, okay, well, we can afford to throw in an extra pick here because we know we've got something coming down the line.
Yeah, it's big, and you can make this work for you here, make your assets work for you. But I saw an article from Jess Rebeck, who does a great job over at The Athletic, and if you want to go read his work, be sure to check him out. But he talked about some of the other details within the Jaire Alexander trade, and he said the Ravens certainly could have held on to Alexander, knowing there will probably be a time this season when their cornerback depth is tested. It would be a coup to have a 2-time Pro Bowler with fresh legs ready to step in. Alexander, though, wanted to play, and the weight to contribute was becoming taxing. Ultimately, the Ravens decided to do right by him while also benefiting. And he mentioned, what you just talked about, Brian, with the draft picks and the compensation, along with the cap savings and roster flexibility. But going back to Jaire himself, he didn't get a lot of an opportunity. It was kind of weird with the injury he had in training camp, and that Buffalo game, you could argue whether he should have been out there or not, but he was one of the reasons why they lost that game with, the play on Keon Coleman and whatnot. And then, they were just saying he's trying to get back healthy, trying to get back into game shape. He only played one other time against the Texans. And we knew coming into this, Brian, that with Jaire, the name of the game is health and injuries. I think that now it kind of makes sense why we've heard some reports about the Ravens scavenging around the cornerback market, because maybe Jaire wasn't in their plans, and maybe they do want to add that additional depth. But if they didn't have a plan for him, they weren't going to use him. Getting anything back for him is a win, although I do wish we would have seen a little bit more, but I guess the cards fell as they did.
Yeah, I mean, given the injury history from last year and obviously not playing this year, and the only thing on tape this year really is that Buffalo game, you probably weren't going to get more than the 6 for him. So, but yeah, I mean, I was actually did a podcast with Ken McCusick, film study, last night, and this was before obviously Jeff's article, and that's what I was saying. I said, it seems like there was a report that the Eagles had been sniffing around him for a while, and the Ravens kept saying no. So it seems like probably at some point either Alexander got wind of it, or or they decided to do him a solid, and they've done that in the past. Sometimes it's guys that you'd rather not let go, but they've done that in the past, and I think it's probably I think it's good on there for their reputation with players in the future. Guys want to sign here and know that, well, if it doesn't work out, they'll do me a solid and take care of me. And obviously with Alexander and Lamar being tight, and let's face it, Alexander needs to play. He
Right.
needs to put film out. I mean, he's coming off of a down year last year. He only got 4 million this year. He was supposed to make 17 and a half, I think it was, with Green Bay before he got cut. So he needs to put some film out there. whether that's the regular season, and certainly Eagles should be into the playoffs too. So it gives him, a good 8 plus then 9, 10, 11, maybe 12 games, to put some good tape out there for being a free agent in March. So I think the Ravens looked at that and said, we can't keep him around as the fourth or fifth, um, cornerback on this roster at this point.
Yeah, and again, we know that Jaire is very prideful. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. And Chuck Pagano, I talked about
Yeah,
this on the show for yesterday, right? Chuck Pagano gave him a huge shout out
that was
on
great. Yeah.
social media. Said, let's read it off. Say, "quote We're going to miss you, Ja. Pro's pro, man's man. What a great example you were on how to handle a really tough situation. Your light shine bright every single day. Much love and respect." He got some heart emojis, some salute emojis. So I give a lot of credit to Jaire because you're right. Like, he needs to play. He wants to play. There was an opportunity elsewhere, and credit to the Ravens for putting him in that situation to go get an opportunity again. I wish it would have worked out differently. And he was,
Yeah.
Brian, if he's going to play in Philly, that first interception he gets, all the Ravens fans go, "Oh, where was
Yeah, of course.
It could have happened in Baltimore." But, they've also had situations in the past where, like last year, Deontay Johnson didn't really handle his situation with grace.
Right.
Eddie Jackson didn't really handle his with grace either. Credit to Marcus Williams because he did. But, it's kind of been a mixed bag in terms of what you're going to get when, the Ravens don't really want to play or a situation happens. And credit to Jaire for really stepping up in that moment. So the Ravens have moved off of 2 players, and coming up, we'll dive into the latest trade rumblings and where Baltimore should be looking at what happens if they do actually get a couple of guys in the building and what it does for their defense or maybe even the offense. Stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And for me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy in the NBA. And right now, over on FanDuel, the Nuggets currently have the 3rd best odds to win the championship at plus 700. Only ahead of them are the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 650, the defending champs Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 200. And I like that number for the Nuggets. They've done a lot of good things this offseason. I think they've addressed some of their weaknesses. So Denver right now, they're a team that I'm liking for that championship. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Brian McFarland still talking Ravens football with you here. It's deadline day. We're going to have here on Locked On Ravens a live stream after the deadline. If the Ravens make a move or not, we're going to have it. We're going to react to everything. So be sure you stay tuned for that. But Brian, I want to dive into, because we've heard all the reports, and seems like almost every insider has been on this in a different way, where the Ravens have been sniffing around defensive help. We've heard insiders specify edge rushers, specify corners, front 7 help. Really feels like that's where the Ravens are focusing right now. In your mind, do you feel like it is on the interior where Baltimore is going to benefit adding here? I mean, or do you think that a depth corner would be a move that they should make alongside a couple other moves? Because I think there's an opportunity for Baltimore to make a few moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is with the bevy of draft picks. And if you're making a corner, just because your example, a corner depth move, you're not going to be spending a 2nd or 3rd round pick on it like that. So as you said, they basically have the 6th round pick, 3/5 and the 4th and the 3rd that they can move at this point. The other 2/5 are comp picks, so they can't move those at this point because they haven't technically been awarded. So I think, I think you could see that. Certainly interior defensive line. And, I mean, they do seem to be pretty happy with their offensive line, despite what, a lot of fans think. When we'll get to that in a bit. I've got one in mind there that seems like a perfect deal. Well, there's 2, I guess, but one nobody's really talked about, but I saw, I'll just bring him up. Cesar Ruiz in New Orleans. I did see that about a week ago. I think that there was some thought that they might trade him.
Right.
He's still young. I mean, he's 26. He's still under contract for 2 more years after this year at a reasonable $9.5 million each year, for a very solid starter. It's not a terrible amount of dead money for New Orleans to eat. Um, Obviously, most people talking about Zeitler. Zeitler would be great too. I think Zeitler would be very cheap. And obviously Tennessee should be in the sell mode as well. The only thing there is when I guess it applies to New Orleans to an extent, but not as much, is you've got rookie quarterbacks in both places. And when you're subtracting from the offensive line while trying to, get your rookie quarterback seasoned and, up to speed, sometimes that's kind of counterproductive. But Ruiz would be a guy, when I looked at his contract, I was like, wow, that looks about perfect. But who knows, that probably would take a third there as well. But that would be, I think is he a right guard or left guard?
I think he's put on the
He's on the right side.
On the right, yeah.
So that would add some depth. If they in Zeitler, same thing, obviously, not just depth, but that that would put a starter in spot, and then create depth behind him with whichever guard you kick back to the reserve. Ben Cleveland would probably be the guy to go, the roster spot at that point. It's still one of the biggest mysteries out there. I mean, I'm not even sure why he re-signed, why they re-signed him either.
Yeah.
If you weren't going to, if he wasn't going to get much of an opportunity, yeah, I don't know. But, and obviously, bringing Jones back off of NFI seems like they did that a little too prematurely. I mean, if his shoulders, if you can't practice because his shoulders aren't ready, then why not keep him on NFI a couple more weeks and worry about it? Because now that's a roster spot you can't do anything with, whereas it could be a basically open roster spot. So those are, yeah, I mean, I think those are kind of the three spots to me, and I would put corner fourth. But so interior offensive line, interior defensive line, and edge.
Yeah, and again, the Ravens, Brian, is different this year, and Jeff noted this, and something that's been talked about on social media a bunch too, where the Ravens over the past couple of years have kind of been operating with the deadline as a luxury, and then being able to add pieces around and saying, "Oh, let's just add to this," and already in a great spot. But Jeff noted that this year it kind of feels like a necessity than a luxury. And it's kind of like you have to try to do something or make a couple of moves in order to keep your season afloat and give you the best chance to what I think the path is, division or bust, where that's probably your only path to get in as that 4 seed. So O-line, I'm with you. Ruiz or Zeitler would be great. Again, they have teased. I mean, Harbaugh said everything's on the table at points, and the O-line has still struggled. It is the guard position gets a lot of flack, and deservedly so. I mean, Falele and Voorhees haven't been great this year, but Ronnie Stanley's been in and out of the lineup with injury. Roger Rosengarten has regressed a bit in his second season, so it's a whole offensive line thing. But it's just interesting because with some of these other players that could potentially be added with the Ravens situation, and I'm kind of looking ahead a little bit to after the season. I'm obviously still focused on this year, but you also have to factor in, let's go back to the Roquan trade when they acquired Roquan and still had to sign him to an extension. They gave up the second round pick for him. Now, if he had left, they would have gotten a third round comp pick probably anyway back for him. So I guess you're kind of moving down around. But for a player that's not like a 35-year-old that you could potentially re-sign, you acquire this guy, Brian, with all the other extensions the Ravens have to work on. Obviously, Lamar's cap hit is still too big. They have to get that number down at some point. Do they have enough room to operate where, I guess with Owe going out, they probably weren't going to re-sign him anyway, so that money was just going to come off the books. Do they have enough room with their cap situation to re-sign a guy to a decently big extension if they trade a high-level draft pick for him, they bring him in, and they say, we want you long-term? Or would that maybe cost them a player who they're trying to re-sign right now?
Yeah, I mean, if the guy comes in, and obviously Roquan was, and Marcus Peters was the same when they brought them both in, then they, the week or two before the end of the season, they re-signed them. Obviously, they brought in Ngakwe. That didn't work out, and I'm sure they had every intention to re-sign him too, but it just didn't. Obviously, it wasn't a good fit. So I think if you're giving up a second or third, I think you're doing that with the thought of re-signing. I'm assuming, fingers crossed that they fit in like the first two and not the last one. But Yeah, I mean, one way or another, they're going to have to get a deal done with Lamar. And if when that happens, that will create a substantial amount of cap space. Now, right now, they only have, and you mentioned earlier about, 11, 10, 11, 12 draft picks. Do we need all of them? Well, right now, they only technically have 36 players under contract for next year. So,
Mm.
and two of those, DeAndre Hopkins and Tyler Wallace are have deals that will void. So they really only have 34 under contract for next year. So they're going to need a lot of draft picks, and they don't have a lot of great, other than Lamar, they don't have a lot of great ways of creating cap space next year. They did this year, but not next year. And one of the great ways next year would have been Matabike, but obviously we don't know what's going to happen there. And that's kind of seems totally up in the air. And if he can't play again, he's got a fully guaranteed $22 million salary next year, so he's going to just be sitting on IR. He could retire and really give the Ravens a break, but I mean, he's just getting to start to earn the big money, and that 22 is kind of hard. Now maybe they could make a deal with him and he could take less or something like that. But usually, I mean, his agent's going to say no. They've definitely, this year was the year that they definitely had a lot more flexibility than what next year will be. So, but they'll have, I mean, they've got, as you said, they've got a lot of free agents. It would be nice to see them get somebody done or maybe two done in December, so you can get that first bonus proration put into 2025, which means less on the cap in the future years, or if this contract goes sideways, less dead money that you would have because you get rid of it immediately. You get one of those bonus prorations done immediately. Then a lot of it will depend on what happens at the trade deadline. If they use up all this cap space, then it's going to be harder to re-sign guys. But if they use up half of it, let's just say, then they might, gives them some flexibility to go out and get some guys re-signed. So I really thought they would have had one of Likely or Jones or Linderbaum done before the season, and obviously that didn't happen. But so here we are.
Yeah, and it all goes hand in hand. This year the deadline extensions, next year. I mean, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But also it's not like Lamar is 35 years old, but it's also not like he's 25 years old either. I mean, he's going to be 29 at the end of this season. This roster, you can still win with it. You dug yourself a really deep hole, really deep hole. But in order to make a move, again, these moves don't just have to be like a 30-however-year-old Zeitler for half a year or Calais Campbell. I mean, I'd love both those moves for this season, but it doesn't have to be that. You can get guys in the building that you can re-sign like a Roquan or Marcus Peters, et cetera, but you do have to wonder, all right, what does that mean for this guy that doesn't have a contract or the next guy that doesn't have a contract?
Right.
In a couple of years, they'll have to figure out what they want to do as Zay Flowers and whatever his contract is going to be.
He'll be eligible after this year, yeah.
And, that receiver market, it's only going up. So hopefully Eric DeCosta shows us a thing or two. And regardless, we'll have you covered here on Locked On Ravens, doing a live stream, talking about everything that happened. But Brian, I appreciate you hopping on. Thanks so much for giving me some time and talking Ravens. Please, before I get you out of here, tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Sure. So right now, I mean, other than this kind of stuff and extensions is sort of the lull of my year. But obviously, if the season does not go well, we'll be talking about the rest of the way. We'll be talking about 2026. So we'll be getting numbers together and kind of moving into that. So that's on Russell Street Report. You'll find my articles there. If it does go that way, I won't do a full preview, but we'll do kind of a quicker preview and then the full preview in January. And then anytime something happens, trade, signing, you can find me on X/Twitter at Raven Salary Cap. That's where, as soon as we can find some numbers to try to put things together, I get it together as quickly as I can to get everybody the information they want to hear.
And look, if you want to become just more knowledgeable on the cap situation or know the latest on Baltimore, as Brian is your man. So be sure to go support him, check him out. All his links will be in the description down below. Brian, thank you again. And thank you to everybody who watched and listened to Locked On Ravens today. Again, we'll be live after the deadline. We'll be talking about if the Ravens made moves, if they didn't make moves. Maybe we'll have streams before that if the Ravens make an early morning move. We'll see what happens there, but we'll have you covered here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form too. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.